If you think about what having a sicker and sicker population does for productivity of an economy, that's not good, right? Healthcare is a very complex, highly regulated system. Distribution is still that way, as you know firsthand, selling into payers, providers, very long sales cycles, very complex negotiation processes. But what we're seeing now with AI and the rate at which we're seeing development there is the building of the tools is getting easier. And what that means is that it should make it more capital efficient to invest in these companies. I think that healthcare is positioned to really leapfrog certain other industries because of how antiquated the current tech stacks are. Because the difference between, okay, what is the current status quo versus, this new technology coming out makes some of these decisions a no-brainer. And the push is coming from providers. They love that.
Yeah, get me out of this system. I want to do something different.
Yeah. There's a tremendous amount of people building in healthcare. So where I see the most friction is
Candace, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to talk to you. You are one of the probably most influential health investors at GC, and by extension, GC is one of the most influential health investors across the ecosystem right now. You all are deploying billions of dollars into health assurance. You're buying hospitals. There's lots of things going on in the GC ecosystem. You've been very outspoken in your concerns about where healthcare is going, the fact that we're spending over $4 trillion a year, the fact that we're not getting better outcomes. If you compare the US healthcare system to any modern Western healthcare system, we typically perform worse. And you mentioned one thing on a podcast recently that you did, which is if we don't take action to reduce cost and improve outcomes in our healthcare system, there's going to be major macro implications for the United States. So I want to start today by saying, take us to the end. Take me to the end. In 5 decades, we haven't been able to solve any of the problems that anyone is trying to solve in healthcare. What does that look like? What has happened, and what are the sort of the macro implications of that for our society and more broadly the world?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. Always love having these conversations with you, and feel really fortunate to have invested in you and what you're building. And also love the very positive note that we're starting out on for this conversation.
Got to start negative to then end up on the positive, all the things we're trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. Yeah, I think the consequences are grave, right? And the impact that kind of not curtailing healthcare spend and improving quality will have on this country is pretty massive and crosses a number of areas. So even just from a kind of economic standpoint, if you think about what having a sicker and sicker population does for productivity of an economy, that's not good, right? We have more people that aren't participating in the workforce, right? We have people dying younger and not able to work as long. You have, people with chronic illnesses, various different diseases, and you think about the burden that creates on caregivers that should be at the prime of their lives. You think about the burden on behavioral health and how that impacts productivity from an economic standpoint. And so, I don't have a specific number for you, but a sicker society is going to mean that we're not going to be as productive of a society. We won't be as innovative as a society. There's also implications just from a budget standpoint too. Right now, our healthcare spend is growing 2% faster than our GDP is growing. And so that's unsustainable. And what does that look like if it continues at that pace? I mean, eventually it has to stop at some point, or you have to start taking funds from other pools of the budget. So what does that mean for our ability to, spend on defense for national security? What does that mean for our ability to invest in things like education, to invest in things like infrastructure? So really big consequences there.
Maybe let me pop into a point there, because I think 2 things you said are really interesting. When you have a sicker and a more aging population, which we do in the US, that's like a recipe for a time bomb. I also was blown away when I learned that for state budgets, which have to be balanced, they can't run a deficit. The only other discretionary item other than Medicaid that states can spend on is higher ed and education. And so as Medicaid spending goes up, education spending goes down, which again is another death spiral. Like as you continue to help sick people and you lower your education spend, you have less people who are productive who can support the people who are sick, and then you get into these weird dynamics. So like it does seem like there's a lot of pending death spirals that are around the corner.
Yeah, that's right. And in our lifetime, if we don't get this under control, there's real question marks around whether we will actually be able to tap into our Medicare benefits, right? And if you just kind of play that out and think about how socially disruptive that would be, I mean, we're paying into that pool right now. What does that mean when all of a sudden you tell people, oh, well, guess what? You're not going to have health benefits when you turn 65, or, oh, well, when we're of age, maybe the number is going to be 85, and maybe that's the right number because health spans will be increasing. But, you see what happened in France when they tried to do that. It's not a politically popular thing.
Definitely not politically popular. And I think there's lots of problems, obviously, and we could probably list off a million of the problems today. I think you and I both probably fall into the camp of optimistic about being able to solve these things. And so I guess, like, why are you optimistic? Like, and why do you spend the days that you have trying to actually invest in the future and bring new things to life? Like, what gives you energy towards thinking that we can avoid that future?
Yeah, you're right. I am very optimistic. And I think because the challenges that we face in the healthcare system are frankly just like so obvious and so big to anyone that's really spending time, whether you're a payer or a provider, you're a physician, you're a patient. Folks can generally agree on what's not working and what's broken. So there's a lot of buy-in around what needs to change. I'd say what's been a lag is having the right incentives to do those right things, right? But if you talk to a payer, a provider, a patient, everyone wants patients to get care sooner, right? People want more transparency around which provider is in network. How much is this drug going to cost you? People want access to their data. Like, these aren't controversial concepts, but what is difficult is, okay, how do you actually implement them? But that actually becomes an interesting problem to try to solve. But that's a long-winded way of saying, I think there's a lot of momentum, and if you zoom out, we're all going in the right direction, which is, okay, we're all pushing for, not all, but in general, most of the stakeholders pushing for more transparency, a more consumer-friendly experience. We want, technology to really enable how we receive care and pay for care. Why can we, buy clothes or buy groceries in a modern way today, but with healthcare, it's like we're back in the Stone Ages, right? So there's a lot of momentum and where we need to go, and I think alignment around that. What's exciting is that, how did I say this? So three things that are exciting. I think healthcare, just by virtue of the industry and wanting to improve people's lives, it attracts really amazing founders that have a broad set of backgrounds. So I'm optimistic because I get to meet founders regularly in our portfolio, outside of our portfolio, that are extremely mission oriented and really want to push the envelope to drive towards a better system. So there's just a lot of innovation happening and really bright minds that are coming together. I'd say from a regulatory and policy standpoint, there's actually quite a lot of bipartisan support around moving towards things like outcomes-based care, right? Modernizing the tech infrastructure of our healthcare system. There's different degrees of, how much gets done depending on who's in office or not. But generally, there's bipartisan support there. And what we're seeing from this administration is a ton of receptivity to innovation on that front, and kind of really modernizing the tech infrastructure that I think can unlock a lot of value. The third thing I'd say is, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, just from an AI standpoint, we have to talk about it. I'm very excited about the barriers coming down to make it easier to build in healthcare. Healthcare is a very complex, highly regulated system. Distribution is still that way, as you know firsthand, selling into payers, providers, very long sales cycles, very complex negotiation processes. But what we're seeing now with AI and the rate at which we're seeing development there is the building of the tools is getting easier. And what that means is that it should make it more capital efficient to invest in these companies, specifically healthcare services companies that have been pretty expensive to scale historically. And that's going to bring more capital into this market and create this cycle where I think there will be more innovation.
The last point is really interesting. I don't think people or founders in other spaces realize the tax that you have on every dollar when you're working in healthcare on compliance, on additional safety and data measures, on just like the simplest provider like Slack that you have to pay for the highest tier to be able to maintain HIPAA compliance, and that's scale that across every single thing that you do as a business operationally. There's a significant additional cost to running these businesses. So I agree with you. I really hope that comes down, I think, for us and then for everyone else. And I mean, man, the amount of times where I interact with somebody at a hospital in a rural part of a state, and I look at the software they're using and it looks like DOS, like literally from it was made in the 70s or 80s. It's a real shame. And I also hope that, as software and as products get easier to build, it also becomes easier to deploy and implement. And I have a belief that legacy software is really embedded and really hard to get out until there is something that is so much better. Yeah. And once there's something that is so much obviously better, then you'll replace it. That's my hope for as entrenched as Epic is. My hope is that one day somebody just builds something that is so much better than what is currently Epic. So that way we can get all of these doctors off of using the Epic system that I've literally heard not millions, but hundreds of doctors complain about. So I'm very hopeful for that. I think the cost of capital thing is an interesting topic that I think is relevant here, because the pace of healthcare innovation is ultimately dependent upon how quickly new products and services can be built, which is ultimately dependent on the cost of capital. And we have two dynamics that I think are at play today, which is the cost of capital is higher than it was in 2020 in like peak ZERP era. And you've also got this now shiny object of AI, which everyone is focused on, which I think has some overlap with health investing, but also a lot of not, right? Like a tech-enabled services company might be using AI to operationally be more efficient, but they're not going to be selling themselves as an AI tool. And so when it comes to attracting capital, I think there is a potential mismatch there. So can you talk me through a little bit about maybe the change that you've seen from peak ZERP 2020, huge digital health rounds, huge valuations, to today, and then sort of what you are envisioning might happen in terms of early stage venture investing for health tech over the next 5 years?
Yeah. Before touching on that, I want to go back to a point you made around the kind of technological innovation and what drives adoption, because I couldn't agree more. I think that healthcare is positioned to really leapfrog certain other industries because of how antiquated the current tech stacks are. Because the difference between, okay, what is the current status quo versus, this new technology coming out makes some of these decisions a no-brainer. And we're starting to see it in areas like AI scribes. The push is coming from providers. They love that.
Yeah, get me out of this system. I want to do something different.
Yeah, because the alternative is they're writing notes on paper with chicken scratch, staying up late at night and putting it into their EHRs. Like, it's an absolute mess. That's not what they went to medical school with. And then you go into areas like revenue cycle management. Like, these are such big pain points, and the way this AI can really up-level you as an organization to do your job better is is really impressive. So I think that healthcare in general is well positioned to leapfrog.
Let's stay on this piece because I think it's really interesting. If you're speaking to the CTO of, pick any major national health plan or maybe a Medicaid plan in a market, and they're getting complaints from their providers that they don't have the right software, they're getting complaints internally that they don't have the right tools. What advice would you give to them on how to actually go about procuring and deploying what are solutions that are available, like scribes, like all these things? Like how do you approach sort of the innovator's dilemma for them?
I don't think there's a kind of blanket set of advice you can give, right? Because if we just stay on this scribes discussion, like the companies I work with, they're using a range of 5 different scribes, and then they're all happy with them, right? Because they're, oh, this one can do this, and this one works better. Like it's, there's nuances there. Ideally you would have, well, there's already, I'm blanking on the name of them, but there are already these, I don't know if they're cooperatives. I forgot the acronym. But there are these like marketplaces where technology providers for government services, they can find a way to get into that marketplace, and then they're basically stamped, right? Of like, oh, this is like stamped for my approval, and then it speeds up the procurement process with different state agencies. So I think something like that, where you're maybe a piece of it is actually just like talent, starting there, right? Like, yeah, you need the right people who, maybe it comes down, maybe the first steps are talent and then incentives, right? So talent, you need the right people in these organizations who have a really good pulse on what technology is being created, but also understand the business that they're in and the ramifications of getting it wrong. Maybe if they haven't been in the state Medicaid department for decades, at least there's this cultural alignment around, okay, I don't know everything, and tech isn't going to just fix everything, and this kind of partnership mentality of working with people who've been there for a long time to figure out what the best tools are to use. But then I think even before that, part of the challenge is with incentives, right? Because right now there's a 90-10 match. So the federal government is actually the one footing most of the bill for any change that you make. So I've heard time and time again when I've talked to state Medicaid agencies around how they go about making decisions to bring in new technology. A lot of times it's like, well, it's going to be super disruptive. And last time it took like 6 months to do this integration. And guess what? We had to work overtime, and we're not allowed to get paid for overtime. And everyone was angry, blah, blah, blah. So I don't want to go through that hassle again, that operational hassle. Or it's like, I can just like throw in this new thing, and we're not going to be footing most of the bill anyways. It's the federal government. So I think there's got to be some type of a top-down push around, hey, and usually with government, there's a carrot and a stick, right? We saw that with EHRs. It's like, hey, we want to see kind of, state health infrastructure reach XYZ criteria within the next 5 years. Here's the funding that we will give you to help you on that journey. And if you're not there within 5 years, there's going to be a penalty. But we want you to succeed. So here are some supports that we can provide when you're assessing different technology providers. We're going to go through an approval process to kind of like rubber stamp certain ones that we think are very good, et cetera. But making sure there's also a market-driven approach, right? It's not just the federal government saying, hey, you need to use this company. It's like, hey, here's an option, like here's a set of different options. You choose what works best for you.
Yeah, which in theory, is the whole theory of managed care, right? To be able to dole out that and add market competition. I don't know that it always works perfectly, especially with some of the things we've talked about. Take me to the capital landscape. Like what, and let's tee up the conversation about like what needs to happen and what solutions need to be built. So like what is the background landscape that you've seen over the last 5 years, and where are we going in the next 5?
So 2020 beginning was really scary for healthcare investing. Oh, is everything going to shut down? What's happening with COVID? And then it turned into this amazing boom period where digital health was like the sexy thing to invest in. And in that zero interest rate market environment, everything was all about growth, top line, not much focus on unit economics. And as we all know very well, that changed drastically when rates changed, et cetera. And now we've fully shifted into a period where the focus, at least on the companies I focus on, so tech-enabled services businesses, these are care delivery organizations, these are managed care organizations, the focus is really on profitability. And in the earlier stages, it's at a unit basis, but over time, it's really about, okay, can you generate cash on a consolidated basis? Can you be an enduring business on your own without VC money perpetually coming into your balance sheet? And that's been a really challenging switch for the industry. That's required different types of talent, right? So the level of financial acumen that you need on management teams to drive a business in that direction is much higher, right? The amount of operational rigor that you have to have when you're controlling not just for top line growth and selling and signing new contracts, but, are we optimizing our margins, right? Are we managing our cash flows appropriately? Just requires a different bench. So that type of talent has been in very high demand. Services are not the exciting space to invest in right now, but it's a big part of healthcare spend, and it's not going anywhere, in my opinion. People need care. What the workforce will look like over time will evolve. How we pay for it will evolve. What the patient experience is like will evolve. I pray it will evolve. I was at the doctor this morning, and I had to fill out paperwork on a clipboard for the 5th time that I filled out many times before. I'm just like, how is this?
They just throw it in the trash after you do it.
Yeah, how is this possible? And I have horrible handwriting. So I'm like, there's no way you are actually taking down this information and putting it in the system, because this is pure chicken scratch. And so I just don't think the industry's going anywhere, right? And so that begs the question, how do you invest in this market? And I think I'm an outlier here, but I'm really bullish still on care delivery. And I'm bullish on outcomes-based care. Going back to our earlier conversation on the macro climate, because we have to figure this out. We have to, right? And we're seeing that even from this administration. Healthcare is the number one focus, right? We've seen it in past administrations too. We've got to get this under control. And so we're at a place right now where I think healthcare services companies have to hunker down, right? It's not just about growth. It's about managing to the margin, managing your cash flow, showing that you can be an enduring business. It's about having capital partners that can stick with you through longer cycles than we've had in the past. Because there's this period that's easy to fall into where you're an early stage company and you can attract a broader aperture of investors, but of crossing that chasm of, okay, I'm early stage and I've proven product market fit and I can grow the top line, but I'm still burning a lot of cash. And there's a question mark if I can ever get to cash flow positive in the foreseeable future. That doesn't sell to most growth equity investors. That doesn't sell to PE investors unless you want a ton of structure. And even then, the check size would probably be too small. And so having the right capital partners around you who can stick with you through that period is really important. And at GC, we try to be that, right? And then the other thing I'd say is that this AI transformation is really important for these companies. I'm a firm believer that a lot of the value of AI will accrue to the services level, at least in my world, the application layer, right? And we're already seeing it today. within companies that I've invested in. We're already seeing improvement on operating losses, right? We're seeing staffing ratios improve. So this is real, and it's moving quickly. I think that we're at a point where companies need to lean into that, but not just in terms of the narrative that they're going out to the market with, but the proof has to be in the pudding. And that's where you get this unlock from a cost of capital perspective. Because it's one thing to say, oh, I'm a healthcare services business that historically would have steady state EBITDA margins in the high single digits, maybe 10% top. But we're investing a ton in AI. And we think we're going to get an extra 5 points. Like, that's not enough, right? Because you're competing against other companies and other sectors, or within healthcare, maybe just healthcare technology, that are, scaling like crazy, right? Because there's just a different profile of a business. So, as a capital allocator, what do I want to put money in? Yeah. So you really have to get into, okay, what are we building and what proof points do we have? And that's what I'm excited about, because I'm seeing it. I've got a number of companies that are doing it at a smaller scale. They're in the earlier stages, but the signals are really impressive. And I think within the next, call it 6, 12, 18 months, we're just going to see that accelerate massively. And then that gives us the right to go into the market and really be an AI native services company. And that is a company that has structurally different margins than what we've seen historically. Structurally different capital needs than what we've seen historically. And so it begs the question, like, what will the next wave of services exits look like, right? If Oak Street was built today, with where AI is today, how much capital would they have needed to scale, right? And how big of an outcome could that have been? How many more patients could they have served, right? And I don't have the answers, but I'm seeing enough on the AI side and on the services side around what they're adopting and the value that they're starting to generate, even at a small scale, to think that we're going to get through this period, and it's going to be really exciting what comes next.
Really cool. I have lots of thoughts, but the one that comes to mind is, I think when people think about AI in healthcare, you think about an AI doctor. I don't know if we're going to have AI doctors anytime soon. You do not think about the fact that every company that employs software engineers probably is going to have to, is not only not could employ half the software engineers, but they're going to have double the output per software engineer. We've already seen that our product teams are half the size in terms of engineers as they used to be, because every engineer is so much more productive. And it's not that we have less product teams, it's that we can do more. And so if every single company in healthcare is doing more, like you said, that is direct output on the patient experience. That is direct output on the ability to deliver lower cost services at a lower cost with greater efficiency. Like, it's really cool and exciting. And I think if this is also one of the things that I do worry about some of the more traditional legacy healthcare companies. I don't know how quickly they're going to be able to get up to speed here. Like, it's one thing to deploy the AI scribe and have your doctors be happier, et cetera. It's another thing to totally gut your tech org and restructure it from principled ways where your engineers are AI natives. And I think that's like as much as I've understood about legacy companies trying to cross the chasm on these sort of technological changes, I'm not super bullish on that. And so I do think that a lot of the push here is going to come from venture activity. And so I think like it's almost like a race to prove how valid this wave is. To your point, you're going to need to prove it to the growth stage equity investors that this is real. Otherwise, it's not going to happen anyway. So it'll be a really interesting challenge to see how this next wave of companies, I think including us, is like whether we're going to be able to figure that out or not in a way that's compelling and can re-suck capital back in, because that is the lifeblood, I think, of a lot of these problems. And I think what I'd be curious to hear your thoughts about now is like where are you seeing problems is, I think, like the AI scribe space is probably like the most clear hot example of like a space in healthcare. But that's like feels like such a low hanging fruit, right? And there's a million other problems in healthcare. So where do you feel like there's a lot of activity right now on the founding company side? And where do you feel like that matches up to the actual needs? And then where are there areas that you feel like are not getting enough attention?
There's just so many people building everything. I'd maybe answer it in a slightly different way. Right? I think that there's a tremendous amount of people building in healthcare. Everything from care delivery to healthcare technology and service of payers and providers, in drug discovery, right? Like we're seeing everything. Longevity, consumer focus that's picking back up. There's a lot of people like yourself, right, who've been attracted to the government-sponsored market. How can you better serve Medicaid? The ACA market has been growing quickly. There's questions around subsidies, right? We've seen there's just a lot of activity. So I don't necessarily think there are major white spaces where no one is building. I think where there's a disconnect between what payers and health systems are solving for and what's being built at the early stage comes down less to the what is being built and what problem does it solve for me now, if that makes sense. So where I see the most friction is you have a leader at a payer or a health system who is under a ton of pressure to keep their job, to hit quarterly earnings, and you've got some amazing new solution in the market that is going to drive a 5-year ROI. It's going to be really hard to get done because they need a solution now, right? And so I think this sweet spot of like, okay, what's being built right now that really resonates with the buyers in the market comes down to, can you drive a near-term ROI? If I'm a physician who's buying an AI scribe, that looks like, okay, am I able to spend more time with my patients and spend less time charting? Wow, immediate satisfaction if you can get that done, near term. If I am a hospital system and you come to me and you say, hey, I can reduce your readmissions right now, like within the next month, starting within the next month by, 25%. And that's a 3-to-1 financial ROI for you. And it's not going to cost you anything to deploy this technology in your kind of discharge process. That's something they'll sign up for, right? That hits their P&L this year. That's what they need. But if you say, hey, we are building a, maybe if you're selling to employers, right? And you want to sell a behavioral health benefit, but for people who have very kind of mild needs. That's a harder near-term ROI to drive, right? And it's probably hard to demonstrate that with numbers as much, right? So that's going to be harder to get done. So I think the unlock there is to figure out, okay, where do I want to be longer term, but what near-term wins can I drive for the buyer? And how can I make those as like quantifiable as possible, right? So that they can have a win within their organizations. And then that earns me the right to do these extra things and, prove them out over time.
Yeah, you got to have a Trojan horse in.
Yeah.
It is, and it's absolutely, I agree with you 100%. It does make me sad to think that if I had designed a magic pill and I said, this magic pill, if you take it, will let you live to 105, perfectly healthy, and then one day you'll drop dead and it'll be the best life ever, I probably couldn't sell that today. It'd be probably really expensive, and I probably couldn't sell that. And that's a little bit sad. But on the flip side, it kind of is human psychology. Like, this is kind of silly, but I remember in one of my early design classes, they talked about how one of the first companies that made toothpaste, it originally it had the flavor, but it didn't have the sort of tingle that you get from the toothpaste. And people preferred having something in the toothpaste that made your tongue tingle so that they felt like something worked. Whereas if you didn't have that, you didn't get the feeling. Yeah. And so like there is an aspect of human psychology in all of this because this is healthcare. It's like you're not dealing with a health plan. You are dealing with a person who is running the health plan, who's under pressure, who's under incentives. You're right. These jobs are stressful. They're hard. They're also financially huge. Like the P&L of a national health plan's market in one market is billions of dollars. It's massive. And so there's a lot of pressure for being even like percentage points off. And I think it's easy to forget when we're on this side trying to be like, we want to help patients. We want to help people feel better. But
yeah. Or like, hey, I've got this technology that's going to solve all of your problems. It's like, oh, but is that going to disrupt the workflows of the nurses that I hire and then cause a bunch of chaos from that? Like there's all these other things you have to think about, right?
Yeah. In regards to psychology, I think being an investor is like one of the weirder jobs in terms of psychology. Like if you are following what other people are doing, you'll probably lose. And you have to, in moments of everyone else is no longer focused on this, they think it's dead. That's the time when you're probably actually going to be most successful. And I think any of us who have felt anything like that, where everyone is telling you it's a bad idea, it's like the hardest thing to do. And to put actual dollars of investment behind, I can imagine is psychologically really challenging. So I'm curious, like all of the consumer, maybe non-hardcore health tech investors that really blew up the space over the last 5 years, they're now gone. It's like they've washed out, right? So here you are left.
They're AI investors now.
They're AI investors now, yep. And they'll be robotics investors soon, probably. So now I think you, as someone who has thought deeply about the space your entire career, this is still the thing that you want to be doing. How do you manage your own psychology and navigate the beliefs that you have about what needs to be true in the future while the psychology of everything else is pulling you to probably second guess and question that?
Yeah. It's a great question. I'd be lying if I said I didn't have friends who've been like, are you sure you don't want to focus on another sector? It sounds like these are really like tough companies to build. And I mean, my answer is no, right? Because what motivates me is playing a role, even if it's a really small role, in this transformation that I think we need as a society around how care is delivered and paid for and experienced. And so seeing that come to fruition means investing in these types of companies and alongside these founders who also want to see that come true. It's not just, okay, can I get like super rich or like have the best returns? I want to do that too. But I think if we do the former, the latter will follow. I think it's a balance, right? You have to maintain a first principle thinking. And that's what I have to work on the most, because now I've been working at the intersection of healthcare and finance for over a decade. And it's easy when you've spent a lot of time looking at a sector to be like, oh, I've seen that company before. They always fail, right? The CEO of our company, Hemant Taneja, talks about this all the time and how, he spent his career looking at multiple different industries. And when he notices himself doing that, he actually takes a step back, because that's not what leads to good investment decisions. You can't be naive, but you still need to believe and kind of be, believe in the art of what's possible and not just become a naysayer. So I definitely check myself there. I really like getting the thoughts of younger people on my team for that reason, because they have this kind of like fresh perspective that I don't have as much anymore. And AI has been a good forcing function. In the early days, I was a skeptic. I was like, I don't know what this is. It's going to blow over. I don't know why everyone's worried about it. But I'm seeing it, I'm using it, and it's real, and I'm excited about it. And that has forced me to open my mind to what's possible. And that's really is like what's driving my optimism today. We can build these companies in a fundamentally different way, at a very different cost of capital. We can attract talent, and kind of resources in a way that we couldn't have before, right? Because people want to apply AI to things that are good and meaningful. And what better place to do that than healthcare? So yeah, there's this tension where I try to remember what I've learned and, the blow-ups, the successes, but also, stay humble and realize that the paradigm is shifting, right? And what might not have been possible before could be possible today because of technological changes, or, maybe the political or the regulatory and policy environment has changed. Oh, wow. Like now, peer support, getting reimbursed. So I struggle, but yeah, I don't see myself turning my back on healthcare services anytime soon. I think we've got a tremendous opportunity ahead of us.
When in your career were you most unsure?
As an investor, it was probably in the early days of AI really picking up, but the market was still quite cold on services, right? The reignition of my excitement and conviction has come from, wow, there's major transformation here. And it's this technological unlock that's driving it. I think you could say that some of the things that CMS is talking about could be major unlocks as well, right? Around modernizing the tech infrastructure of federal and state healthcare systems. So early ChatGPT days where we didn't have the benefit of AI yet, but we also weren't the hot sector that people were wanting to throw money into. And it's like, oh, by the way, we don't care if you're growing a bunch on the top line, like you need to become profitable. So, wow, okay, well, let's try to figure that out in value-based care.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think, if you take yourself 5 years in the future, what do you think you're going to look back on this time for you personally and feel like you either learned a lot about or really changed your perspective on?
Yeah, I think I'll look back on this period having learned a lot about what it means to roll up your sleeves and help people build, right? I think a lot of investors can fall into the trap of, okay, what's the next new hot deal I'm going to do? I'm very much in a period where, yes, I've done new deals. I closed a deal last week, an early stage deal, but I wouldn't say I'm out hunting for the next new deal. I'm like, I love this portfolio of companies that I have. I think they can drive a lot of impact. I think they can drive returns. How do I set them up to succeed? And I'm not in the driver's seat, right? We don't own majority stakes in these companies. Oftentimes I'll have a board seat, a board observer seat, but I'm not the founder. I'm not the one building. And so what I think this period is helping me refine is this concept of like influence, right? How can I help influence a better outcome? Is that through talent introductions? Is that through a lot of the policy work that I've been doing, right? I'm not at CMS. I can't write policies or change regulations. I'm not a part of Congress. But I can sit down with our policy team and take insights from our portfolio and write a white paper that most people on the Hill are going to read. And, CMS definitely, I think, was influenced by some of that, right? So, and I think some of the things that they're talking about, like a national provider directory, right? Like these are things that will help the founders that I work with and even the ecosystem more broadly just drive the impact they want to have with less of this red tape that you talked about. Like sometimes it's just so hard to build in healthcare. And a lot of the time it should be that hard because this is, we're dealing with people's lives. We're dealing with their health. We need to take it seriously. But sometimes it's just stifling innovation. And so, I hope that I look back on this period as one where there was a lot of just like planting of seeds on the policy front, on the AI transformation front to make it easier for this ecosystem of this new generation of care delivery companies to flourish. And we'll have real points on the board by then. We already do. We'll just have more.
Super cool. What is the legacy that you want to leave? Like how will you know when you are done achieving what you want?
Yeah, I think, I've got a very clear vision in my head of what the U.S. healthcare system can become. And it's very much aligned with how General Catalyst thinks about health assurance and is one of the reasons why I joined the company. And I want to look back, towards the end of my career, towards the end of my life, and say that, I was a part of a team or a group of people that it spans beyond GC, right? It's the founders. It's people in industry, et cetera, that really help propel us forward in that direction. That's what I want to say. I want to be able to look at the companies that I've allocated capital to and said like, wow, they did something really amazing. And they impacted a lot of people's lives. I think the other piece of it too is I really enjoy working with the next generation of investors. I get a lot of just like pleasure from teaching people and seeing them grow and just develop. And so I think a big piece of that success factor for me will be like, okay, what does the generation after me look like? What imprint are they leaving on the world, healthcare? Are they good people? Are they kind and hardworking, right? I'd like to see that.
It's kind of interesting that venture investors are potentially some of the longest term thinkers, maybe outside of like Fortune 500 founder CEOs. Like no one else really is thinking about 10-year timelines. No capital allocator is. Fortune 500 CEOs are thinking about usually the quarter or two in front of them, right?
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
So I asked this question to most people to end, and I think it's fitting with what you just said, which is you've got a very clear vision of the future of U.S. healthcare. So if you could snap your fingers today and make it happen, whatever it is that you want can just change in however way you want for U.S. healthcare. What would you snap your fingers and do?
Well, I think I would start with how data and information flows. It needs to be in the hands of patients. And we need to have, a lot more control over how that data travels with us. I think that would unlock a lot of innovation. It would improve care continuity. It would improve the quality of care. It would arm citizens with more information to make informed decisions about their health, right? And it's not just, data about their health. It's how much is something going to cost me so I can plan. I think that piece around, it's an overused word, but like data interoperability, but just basically the freeing of data, but with proper guardrails, I think is a really important foundational piece. And then, I think that sets you up to then just have a much better consumer experience, right? Like, it shouldn't be that hard to schedule an appointment with your provider. It shouldn't be that hard to get a second opinion. It shouldn't be that hard for me, who's been working deeply in healthcare for over a decade now, to choose which health plan I want every year. Like, is this in English? I don't know. Like, should I, It makes no sense, right? It's not consumer friendly. And so I'd love to get to a point where, you know, you can access high quality healthcare in the same way that you can, you know, access your bank account or purchase goods by tapping your phone. The technology is here. We just need the right incentives to, to drive that innovation.
Love it. Candace, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.